Everybody right to go? Yep. There are 25 active cases of coronavirus in Victoria. There have been 2 new likely acquired cases notified to the department in the last 24 hours. Both are household primary contacts, close contacts of previously confirmed cases linked to the Holiday Inn. There are also 2 new cases in hotel quarantine. That is, those 2 new return traveller cases tucked away in hotel quarantine. 23,950 test results received over the last 24 hours. That's a really strong number, and again we thank everyone who went and got tested, and again confirm for every Victorian it is literally the most important thing you can do. If you've got any symptoms at all, please go and get tested, and please do that as fast as you possibly can. In terms of those 2 new cases, they are linked to the community ones. They are linked to the Holiday Inn and that private dining event at 426 Sydney Road, Coburg. They've been isolating, they've been at home, they've done the right thing. They're not unexpected positives, although I will make it clear they did test negative some days ago. So they've been isolating, and as a result there's no further exposure sites, there's no further risk, if you like, beyond them as close contacts. We wish them well, of course, in dealing with the virus, but they are family members of known cases, and again to confirm, they have been isolating at home as we had asked them to do. There'll be further interviews just to double and triple confirm all of those things, but that's the advice that we have. We are retesting all the attendees of that private dining event, and we will update you in terms of results of those tests as they come to hand. As I said, the 2 new cases today did return negative tests several days ago, so it's just again proof positive that you do need to take that time. You do need to recognise that the virus, whilst it's fast to infect and is moving rapidly, it sometimes takes a while before people will develop symptoms and return a positive swab. Beyond that, and I don't want to be celebrating the fact that we have additional cases. You'd always prefer no new cases, but it is fair to say that with just 2 contained additional community cases today, this strategy is working. We are well placed to be able to make changes tomorrow night. As I said yesterday, I'm not in a position to definitively commit to that because these next 24 hours will of course be crucial. However, with a relatively small number of new cases, the excellent work that our contact tracing teams have done, the work of lab technicians and so many other people, we are very well placed. But we won't know, and we won't be able to make a final call on that until sometime tomorrow, and as we've done on numerous occasions. We will wait as long as we can, still trying to give people as much notice as possible, but we'll wait as long as we can in order to have as much data as possible to make that important judgment. Beyond that, before I throw to Jerome just to speak to a bit more details around testing and things of that nature, I do want to make very clear that a senior group of officials endorsed by Cabinet, we are actively pursuing and examining the construction of a purpose-built quarantine centre, a centre that would serve to replace in at least significant measure, maybe not entirely, but in significant part, the work of inner-city hotels. This will be based in large part on the Howard Springs model, so people will be in the same location but they would not be sharing the same spaces, so they're not under the same roof line. It would be a cabin-style, village-style environment where there would be fresh air, where there would be not zero risk but lower risk. That work is ongoing, and as a feature of that work there'll be a delegation of senior officials travel to the Northern Territory as soon as is practicable to go and see firsthand how the Howard Springs facility is set up. In talking with some interstate colleagues overnight, I think that there is a compelling argument for this, not just in Melbourne, not just in the Northern Territory. I know the Queensland Government are working in partnership with the Commonwealth around a facility of similar structure. The 2 obvious candidates, Avalon Airport, you've got space and you've got an international terminal, and of course Melbourne Airport as well. We will pursue both of those, do that work. It's well and truly underway, and we will report progress as that happens. But I think we do have to have a proper conversation at a national cabinet level about what we can do, what further can we do to reduce the risk, particularly in light of this UK strain and all that we know about that. So when we have more to say about that work, then obviously we'll make announcements. But that's our intention. It's more than just scoping it. We are going to get on and build a facility. It's just a matter of exactly how big it is and the more precise details of where. But Avalon and Melbourne airports are standout candidates, and I'm very grateful to them for the partnership and the work that they've already done with us. We'll update as and when we need to. I now might throw to Jerome just to give you a few more figures around the work that's been going on overnight, and then we're happy to take any and all questions you have.
Thank you, Premier, and good morning. Yesterday we discussed really a number of key lines of inquiry that we were continuing to pursue, and we've made some solid progress overnight on those areas. I'll update you on that now. We currently have around 40 public and private exposure sites still listed for the Holiday Inn outbreak. The majority of those are now really starting to be mopped up, and there are a few that we are still actively looking for support on. Yesterday we discussed the new case 17, or yesterday's new case 17, somebody who works in a number of mental health units with Alfred and Royal Melbourne at two of our northern suburb sites. As of last night, we identified 70 primary close contacts associated across those three units. There's been a really phenomenal piece of work done by the teams at Royal Melbourne and Alfred over the last 24 hours or so. We have not just tested those 70 individuals, but also a whole number of other people's potential secondary contacts in and around those mental health units. Results are still coming in, but we've now got over 114 negative results coming out of those broader populations. That includes the majority of those 70. So we are continuing to watch those results come in today, but the initial feedback on those is very encouraging. I'm really grateful for all the support we've had from our mental health teams, and also to ensure that we maintain the state's mental health services during the inevitable anxiety that we get when we see a positive case so closely associated with these settings. We also talked about two kinders in Glenroy. We had 10 positive close contacts at Glenroy Central Kinder. 8 of those, all of those have now been tested. We have 8 negative results. We are awaiting 2 further results later on today, but again, an encouraging first step. And we had around 90 primary close contacts at the Good Start Early Learning Centre, also in Glenroy. We had a fantastic turnout yesterday at a dedicated testing centre at Oak Park. For about over 70 people came out associated with the Glenroy Central, with the Good Start Early Learning Centre. All 70 of those who were tested yesterday have returned negative test results, and we have the pop-up site again active this morning at Oak Park to ensure that the remaining primary close contacts, about 20 people, also conclude their testing. But again, a positive step in the right direction. We've also listed Queen Victoria Market, the fruit and veg section we discussed yesterday, as a possible exposure site. We've identified around 100 primary close contacts. That includes 34 stallholders and around 72 people from a primary school in Ballarat who are on a school excursion trip to the market at the time on the Thursday in question. Again, all of those people have been tested. We are working through those test results from those cohorts. Again, my real thanks to all the stallholders and the management of Queen Victoria Market. I know this is not an easy time, as we have obviously a lot of business pressures in that area, but it's been good to get such swift response from the market and to ensure that we get people tested and we can establish whether there's been any further on spread. We've obviously also seen an extensive deep clean of the market. I can confirm the market, within the current restrictions of our current lockdown, but the market is a safe place to access for those who are able to access it within their 5k limit for the designated purposes. We've also done some retesting of the original party, the 38 people who attended the private dining event on the 6th of February in Coburg. Those retests are going well. We test people a number of times. We obviously, as I've said many times before, all these people who are part of our investigation continue to isolate even when they return a negative test result, and the retesting is also throwing up negative test results, which again is a positive and encouraging sign. Through the QR code system, and of course with 40 exposure sites, we really rely so heavily upon really good contact tracing systems at a whole range of venues, and particularly strong contact tracing systems at the 2 swimming pools that we've listed as exposure sites. We've identified over 400 close contacts through those swimming pools. A number of those are coming through our testing system. And again, I'd encourage people who have been to those swimming pools on the times and dates set out on our website. Please do come forward and let's get you tested today. Let's make sure we have a really comprehensive understanding of what may have happened in terms of any potential onward transmission from the 3-year-old who was in those swimming lessons. The classes most immediately associated with the positive case have tested negative, but again, we continue to search in case there's been any other potential spread. We listed also a new Tier 1 exposure site yesterday, which is the Sacco's Fruit World at Broadmeadow Central. That goes back to 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. on the 9th of February. We've also listed Broadmeadow Central as a Tier 3 exposure site, again on the same day, 9th of February, from 12:15 to 1:15. Tier 3 means please be extra vigilant about monitoring for symptoms. So we are not excessively concerned about that location, but we are, again, please asking people if you've been to Broadmeadows, to the Central Shopping Centre on the 9th of February at lunchtime, please keep a very close eye on your symptoms. Any remote symptoms, please do get tested. Yesterday I reported around 1,300, 1,400 primary close contacts. We now have I can now give you a better rundown of where we are with our current contacts list, and of course these numbers do fluctuate from day to day as we see the outbreak continue to develop. We have 59 household and social primary close contacts across the Holiday Inn cases. We have now 499 hotel quarantine staff and residents, all of whom are in isolation. We have 1,189 primary close contacts linked to the exposure sites, including the swimming pools and all the other public exposure sites that we've talked to in recent days, and 1,191 Terminal 4 passenger primary close contacts. All of those have been frequently messaged, and we are very aware of their status. I'm also pleased to confirm that 99% of new primary close contacts that we identified on the 12th of February were notified by our contact tracing teams within the 48-hour national benchmark. That's following a 99.8% figure the day before. So we're continuing to see really very high levels of follow-up by our contact tracing teams, and I'm so grateful to the teams for all the hard work that they are doing. And the percentage over the week is now 99.5%. We've also sent just under 850,000 text messages to people across various suburbs, alerting them to the various exposure sites that we have and encouraging them to watch for their symptoms and to get tested if they have any doubt at all. As the Premier said, we saw a very strong testing day again yesterday. In addition to the numbers that we've declared this morning, we also had a further 11,000 test results already through, negative test results through by 8 a.m. this morning, and there are around 10,000 samples going through the labs earlier this morning. So we already have some good load from yesterday. All of our testing network at the moment is running green, so we have reasonably short waiting times across all of our sites. All of our sites are operating with full capacity and extended hours. Again, I would encourage us, as we're now in the 4th day of this circuit breaker, I'd please ask anybody who's got any remote concerns about their health, who has been to these exposure sites, who's listening to these messages, please come and get tested today. We want as comprehensive a view as possible. As the Premier has said, we have picked up 2 new positive cases today, but because they're within our primary close contact network, we're not excessively concerned, and that's the kind of pattern we want to see. But it's so important that we have a comprehensive picture as we go forward over the next few days. We've got rapid response sites, testing teams deployed at Coburg Lake Reserve. We have an additional walk-up site at Coburg Lake Reserve that was nice and busy this morning. So again, thank you to the 350-odd people who turned up this morning before we came out to talk to you. We have a pop-up site at the Featherbrook Reserve in Point Cook, and we maintain active in Sunbury at the Old Masters site. All these expanded operations will continue over the next few days. Finally, it is going to be a bit warmer over the next few days. I'd ask everybody who is coming to our testing sites, please prepare. Make sure you bring a bottle of water. Make sure you bring some entertainment along if you are waiting in a queue for 1 or 2 hours. And we will, of course, be watching the weather very closely to make sure our teams continue to operate effectively and safely. And then finally, my thanks to the entire community. We've had really some fantastic feedback from people over the last few days, We've had a number of community forums relating to the exposure sites, and we're hugely encouraged by the way that people have come out and responded to our messaging. We are now seeing the kind of scenario we wanted to see, with high testing numbers and a very good understanding of how our remaining exposure sites are developing. Our team has a lot more work to do over the next 24, 36 hours. We will continue to do that, and we'll advise you again tomorrow as to how we run. With that, I'll hand back to the Premier for questions.
Well, that'll be based on public health advice, whether we can go back directly to the settings that were there on Thursday and Friday, or whether we have to ease back into it. We will get these rules off as quickly as we possibly can, as safely as we possibly can. And look, I wish I could give people a definitive answer right now, but that would not be honest. That would be guesswork at best. So the best thing to do is we just wait, see what happens over these next 24 hours. It's working. Has it worked full stop? We won't know that until tomorrow, but we've got very promising early signs, and I'm so grateful to all those Victorians who are isolating at home for 14 days because we've asked them to, all those Victorians who've come forward and got tested because we've asked them to, and all of our staff who are working literally night and day to run this to ground. And the good news is they are, but of course we have to wait and see what develops over the next 24 hours. Well, it's difficult to, I suppose, deal with what is a relatively hypothetical set of circumstances. But, you know, the reason I say we're well placed, if we see a continuation of these sorts of numbers, then I'm certain that the Chief Health Officer and I and other colleagues will be in a position to make some very favourable announcements tomorrow.
So if there's no cases that come up tomorrow that aren't linked to the holiday, you dare to say that we can go back to the previous set?
Well, it's fair to say exactly what I've said. We are well placed, but it's too early for us to make a definitive call on that. That's why it's 5 days. It wasn't 3 days with a review or 4 days with a review. We said we would need the time to test and retest to have that degree of confidence. And again, I'll just remind everyone, this comes about because you've got to assume that there are even a handful of cases that you don't know about, and that if you're open, they don't finish up with 1 or 2 close contacts, they finish up with hundreds of close contacts, and they in turn hundreds of secondary contacts. That is I know it's difficult, it's very painful, but it is effective in pulling these things up. These are promising results. We are well placed for tomorrow, but we said it was 5 days for a reason. That amount of time is needed for us to have the confidence to be able to hopefully make changes. Yes.
And what do you say to the number of regional Victorians that are sitting there listening to you saying that you are bringing rules off as quickly as possible, yet they're sitting there going kind of case for 400 cases?
Well, as I said to you yesterday in quite some detail, you can't set up a ring of steel in 5 minutes. If you've given people any notice whatsoever in Melbourne that there was going to be a stage 4 lockdown, a 4 reasons to leave your home, but not included the whole state, logic tells you, and indeed past practice tells you, that very significant numbers of people from metropolitan Melbourne would have travelled into regional Victoria. That's not... No, well, as I said very clearly to you yesterday, you can't, if you give people notice, so at lunchtime you announce you're going to have a stay at home, 4 reasons to leave at midnight, which I don't think is unreasonable to give people some notice, you cannot establish a ring of steel in that short amount of time. What this is designed to do is to stop people travelling to where the rules are softest, to where the rules are easiest, and bringing the virus with them. We don't have cases in regional Victoria, and we're determined to keep it that way. We don't for a moment underestimate how challenging this is for everybody, regardless of what postcode they live in. But at the same time, the decisions were practical and they are working. Only time will tell, though. These next 24 hours will be critical, and if I could make a pronouncement with certainty about tomorrow, then I would, but that would not be the right way to go. We just have to wait and see how many more cases, and indeed the nature of those cases, over the next 24 hours.
You said it's trying to establish the ring of steel immediately. You've had the better part of a week to set one up if you go to. Has any work been going on establishing a ring of steel if it's deemed necessary to keep Melbourne under a different regime to the rest of Victoria?
Well, we don't believe that's going to be necessary. But there's work goes on at Victoria Police Command. It's obviously a continuous process.
How long would it take to set up the register?
I'd need Victoria Police could probably give you a sense of that. But there's different variations. You can have something that is a genuinely hard lockdown where every single vehicle on every single road is being stopped. That won't see too many police stations open, won't see too much community policing going on. That's a very different set of circumstances than what we would always prefer. Then there are other checkpoints on major roads where you randomly check people. There's a whole range of different variation here. The most important thing to acknowledge is that if you give people notice, any notice whatsoever, and you have different rules in different parts of the state, it just stands to reason, and this is not an opinion, we saw this happen on a number of occasions during 2020. I'm not having a go at people for doing this, but people will go to second residences, they will go to family and friends, and they'll in regional Victoria, and they will potentially take the virus with them. So that would be a situation, and I went to this a couple of days ago. So Melbourne settles, we're able to lift these rules, and then a week later, or maybe even further than that, we start to see wastewater testing results showing that there is virus in regional Victoria. We don't want that. We just don't want that.
Just on the new quarantine facility.
Yes.
What side of Melbourne Airport are you looking at? What part of it?
It's a bit too early for us to say here is a plot of land. There's obviously space there. There's not as much space as there is at Avalon. There are obviously many hundreds indeed. I think it's the best part of 6,500 acres, so it's a pretty big site. Not all of it could be used, but there are probably more options there. The other thing too is that we have different groups. So you've got return travellers, you've got flight crew. Part of our discussions with Melbourne Airport for a while now have been about a specific facility for flight crew being built there. So again, it was important to be clear with people that this work is going on. We think this is, again, not zero risk, but it will get the risk level down. And when we have, because a lot of that work is going on, when we have updates to provide to people, we will.
You said yesterday that you're looking at Avalon as a facility for charter planes. Are you today now saying that could be a facility for more general quarantine?
It certainly could be. As I'm briefed, it's a international airport that's got all the relevant tickets and approvals from the Commonwealth Government. The point I'm making though is, and I think I'll just make the point for you. Obviously, if you charter a plane, you have much greater control over where that plane lands. If it's a commercial private business, then it may be harder to get them to land at Avalon when they are much happy to be landing at Melbourne Airport. Those matters have to be worked through, and that's not just a matter for us. The federal government would need to be involved in that as well. But certainly, as I understand it, and I think the Tasmanian example would bear this out, where there have been some charters fly in there when other international flights don't. There is more flexibility when it comes to charter flights. But some of that detail and whether we split the task between two sites, that's still yet to be worked through.
How long realistically are you looking at before setting up your bespoke quarantine?
Well, again, part of the work that's being done is to answer exactly those questions. And that'll depend on size, it'll depend on a whole range of different factors. The issue here is not so much, I think, the prefabrication of a number of cottages or dwellings, whatever you might call them. They can be done relatively quickly and they're done off-site. It'll be about services, water, power, sewerage, all those sorts of issues. Again, we'll have updates and we'll have them in good time. It's not a small undertaking. It's not a zero risk undertaking, but it has a lower risk than what shared facilities in the centre of Melbourne, where even if people are separated, they are still in the same space. They're still sharing the same roof line, the same... That's not to say it's unsafe in any way, but it's at one risk level. We think by building this purpose-built facility, we can get that risk level down further.
Will the state pay for the whole thing?
We'll have some conversations with the Commonwealth and indeed with the private sector about how this can be a partnership and a joint venture, whatever you want to call it. The key point is that hotel quarantine costs a lot, no matter where you put it. That's not the real issue here. The real issue is getting this done safely, getting as many people home as we can safely, acknowledging that it's not the 2020 virus, it's different, whether it's South African or a UK strain or whatever the next strain will be. And particularly given that we're so close to the vaccine being rolled out. But at the same time, we all have to acknowledge that, until you've got the world with the jab, we're always going to have some sort of quarantine, there's going to be rules. It's not going to be that kind of freedom of movement that we had all grown used to. So this facility, even if it was very large, will serve a purpose for a long time, I think, and then can be there as hopefully as part of a national network of these sorts of facilities when we have a bushfire, for instance, when we have other emergency accommodation needs, when we confront whatever circumstances are there for us in the years to come.
Given that Melbourne's currently declared a hotspot for the Northern Territory, does that mean that we have to wait at least 2 weeks for a delegation to get up there?
Oh, we'll be talking with the Northern Territory government about that when it's appropriate, and that's one part of the work. The whole thing's not dependent on that. There's lots of work going on besides, but we think it's.
It affects timelines, so.
No, I don't think it does. It's, as I just said to you, it's one part of it. There's lots of other work going on that doesn't require a visit to Howard Springs, but we think it's important to go there. I won't be going there. Officials will be when it is safe and appropriate to do that. I don't think it'll hold the thing up at all.
You need thousands of these units to make this work, correct?
Sorry, James?
You need thousands of these units to make this work, given the 14-day duration quarantine. Is it really vital?
I think it is. If you can do it in hotel rooms, then you can do it in family-based cabins.
The hotel rooms already exist.
Yeah, and as I said to you, I'm not for a moment pretending it's easy and can happen in a week. Right, it's a significant thing, but we think it's feasible, and we think that we can do it at some scale. Exactly how many people, how many people could be there at any one time, that's to be worked through. But we think it can be a significant facility. And just as, I suppose, probably the best example to answer your question, James, is that the federal government and the NT government are currently in partnership to boost quite significantly the Howard Springs setup. So it absolutely can be done. And again, my advice, and I'm not a builder, my advice is that the prefabricated nature of these dwellings could mean that could be done while other work was done around services and road networks and all of those things.
There's a facility already at Cherry Creek that, as I understand it, now has services running through it.
And we are looking at all facilities that are not yet open, so facilities that could be fast-tracked. We're looking at federal government facilities. We're looking at, there's a big long list. I'm just giving you the ones that I think are probably standouts for the obvious reasons, but it doesn't mean we wouldn't use others. But again, they'd all have to be safe, they have to meet the highest of infection prevention and control standards, all of those things. We're not ruling others out. And it may well be that if we can have this National Cabinet discussion, if we can continue the National Cabinet discussion that's already started, I think, there may be some federal government facilities. There may be an army barrack somewhere that can be used. There might be all manner of different parcels of land or particular structures that can safely be repurposed. Again, not to get to zero risk, but to get to a lower risk than what we currently have.
Is this not inherently an admission that we haven't been able to make this work in hotels?
No, I think it is inherently an acknowledgement that this is wildly infectious, even more so than what 2020 was. And look, if you've got an option to do something that the experts are telling you, at least on paper and in practice in the Northern Territory, can be made safer than what you're doing now, so lower risk, then I think we're obliged to look at that. And that's exactly what we're doing, and I'm confident this is what we will build. Let's go Alex and then James. No, what it means is that, today I can confirm for you that flights will not be returning on Thursday. We'll need some time, and again, the nature of our decision and its effect on at midnight, they will not be going straight back on again. But later in the week, I'll update you on when flights will be coming back. Well, there's always exemptions for quarantine. For instance, they're not affected by this. There's always some people who would be able to get in for whatever reason. But as to the return of flights and their schedule and what the impact of this on our quotas, on our caps, today's too early for me to confirm that, but I'll confirm that for you later on in the week. Why don't we get James? I think had one for me first. Oh, sure.
So your computer models that you're running to see whether it's safe to unlock, have you amended in any way your assumptions about the compliance level of the public this time versus how they were behaving last year?
So yes, all the contemporary data that speaks to behavioural compliance is as contemporary as it can be. And those scrub surveys come through at regular intervals that give us some indication of that. They're probably not the main drivers. The infectiousness of the virus is a significant one, and the overall movement of people, which is a real-time data provision, are probably the key ones. Compliance is important, but it's not the overarching driver.
So is it fair to say that the assumptions that you're working on are that there is a lower level of compliance this time than there was last?
I think it will differ depending on areas. I don't know the exact details. That it's mostly external agencies that are plugging in the data related to that. Some areas are just as strong as during stage 4, through August, September. So it'll depend.
The Premier said a minute ago that he envisaged a situation in which these quarantine facilities might be required for a long time, even after we've been vaccinated. Can you explain why?
I think it's a brilliant idea to have quarantine facilities. We will all.
Well, I mean, these quarantine facilities may continue to be required for this particular virus.
Well, it's certainly going to be several months before we get significant coverage through a vaccination program for the Australian population. That means that there will be an ongoing risk of transmission. We actually don't know. We know that the vaccines are terrific, both the Pfizer and the AstraZeneca, at protecting individuals from dying, from having severe illness. We are yet to really know with great clarity the extent to which they stop onward transmission of that virus, so people getting infected in the first place. So if there are ongoing cases and clusters, there'll be a need to isolate people and quarantine people.
Or dying. Why do we care?
So there will be people who continue to get sick and die. When you've got coverage of everyone over 65 years of age, that means that you've reduced the risk across the population very substantially. But there are literally thousands of individuals in hospitals as we speak, in their 30s and 40s and 50s, who are dying or who are desperately unwell.
Who have been vaccinated?
No, people who are yet to have been covered by a vaccine. If we had, for example, 100% coverage with our vaccine, there's still 5% of the population who won't seroconvert, who won't get really good immunity. So there may well be, requirements for quarantine and isolation in those circumstances as well.
So just to make it clear, people need to understand that we could have vaccinated 95% of the population, and we could still be looking at a situation in which people coming into this country have to quarantine for 14 days.
We don't know yet. That's a long, long way away. And as I say, there's not clarity or certainty around the effects on transmission from these vaccines. There's very encouraging data out of Israel at the moment, where for those who are over 60 years of age, who've almost universally been vaccinated now, that hospitalisation and transmission have decreased significantly. We need to see that for the AstraZeneca vaccine as well, and we need to see what it means for different cohorts of the population and whether there'll be further vaccines that are available and that have different characteristics and effects.
But our present trajectory is not going to change.
We don't know what the present trajectory is. We know that it's going to be very protective for hospitalisation and for serious illness. That's a great thing regardless.
Professor Sutton, at the current state of play, when is the earliest you would be comfortable having international flights come back into Melbourne?
Oh, it's not my call. Look, there are lots of competing decisions around that. It's a conversation between CQV, the Premier, Cabinet and others.
But on health advice, you're the one that provides that one would be most comfortable.
So it's not a health advice decision, it's a decision around multiple variables. So I'll provide my input into that conversation.
I don't know if this is for you or Jerome.
Yeah, the all public events will also have health input in that regard based on, what comes through today and tomorrow.
Craig Tiley has asked for what said that folks
We will look at the data today and we'll make a decision and have conversations tonight, tomorrow morning.
Notifications were sent to, I think one of you has said, 1,600 people who were interned before at the airport. Is that your understanding that that's all the people who were interned before? Because there seem to be others who haven't received Victorian notifications that happen in the state.
Oh, so those who were on outbound flights needed to be contacted by our interstate colleagues. So if they're on inbound flights, they're the manifests that we followed up, and Jerome can maybe speak more to that. But there'll be people who've gone to the airport with family. There'll be others who've gone there without being on a flight manifest necessarily. So there's some complexity to it. But for people who are leaving Victoria, it was agreed through HPPC that those receiving jurisdictions would follow up those individuals. I'll let Jerome speak to the rest.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, thanks, James. It's been a very clear process for how we deal with people at airports. It's a threefold play. We get information from the National Incident Room that gives us information on flight manifests. So people who are registered, who provide their information to the airlines on particular flights. For all those inbound flights, so flights arriving here in Melbourne, we as Victoria take the responsibility for following up all those people who arrived on the 29 flights who arrived on Tuesday the 9th of February in the morning. Our interstate colleagues deal with those people who departed from Melbourne and arrived at whatever airport they arrived in, even if those people have subsequently travelled back to Melbourne. So that is absolutely their responsibility, and we do the same thing in reverse for other outbreaks. We followed up, of course, all the staff records of people who we know were working at Terminal 4 and the very many retail units and other functions, airport staff, office staff, etc. All those records, it's the obligation of the employers, there's organisations there to provide that information to us. And the third leg of the response is the public appeals. That's why we stand up every day. That's why we list exposure sites, encouraging people to say, if you've been at the airport and if you're not coming up on these systems, we need you to get in touch with us to isolate and to test.
So just to clarify, I attended the Avalon site for a different scheme of quarantine, and this is correct. So when we were bringing over the water bombers to assist with the Melbourne's fire protection, definitely went out and saw a very scaled down. So that could house 4 or 5 from memory, but not to the scale of this. In terms of support, absolutely. I mean, these are, we know how successful Howard Springs is, and we know that these kinds of environments where there is lots of air, where people can mix in their own cottages or safe areas without having contact, where there's open air for staff, where there is large space, these are safe environments.
This might be more of a question for the Premier than for you, but we've had a period of almost 6 months last year when Victoria wanted to take international return travellers, when we could think about how to best reset our hotel quarantine program. Why is it only now, when in the space of a week we had 3 infections in 3 different hotels, that we're now talking about these alternatives to mitigate these transmissions?
Well, Rachel, I don't think we spent too many months of last year fixated on the UK strain. That's the first point I'd make to you. Secondly, I think Victorians would have wanted me and my team to be exclusively focused on defeating the second wave, not necessarily constructing a village down at Avalon.
Premier, hotel quarantine was what got us into the second wave, so we spent most of last
Yeah,
year
and
fixated on...
then I look forward to you making the same criticism of Queensland, the same criticism of South Australia, the same criticism of New South Wales, West Australia. You know, this is a different virus. It's changing. Our response has to be nimble, just as, you know, we've made changes all the way along. Other states have made changes too, and we've been pleased to be part of that process. National Cabinet's agreed to a whole range of different changes. I don't think you could say, I'll just pick a date, say a month ago. I don't think you could, or certainly 2 months ago, I don't think you could say that you had every staff member across the board, across Australia, being tested every day. I think that is the case now. So look, we have to change as the virus changes. And let's be clear, and I don't want to alarm people, but we're talking about the UK strain. We've not seen community transmission, not to my knowledge, of the South African strain. And who knows what else is developing out there. It's nimble, it changes, and our response has to also.
When we were thinking about resetting hotel quarantine last year, did we consider putting quarantining people outside CBD?
Well, a couple of points. Firstly, this program has been reset, and it's simply wrong for anybody to assume that it hasn't been. It's been substantially reset, and it has led to a new set of protocols across the whole country. The staff testing is just one example of that. But it may need to be refined further. That's the point that we've made continuously. It's not static. As to options, I'd need to go back and check my records, Rachel. That is some months ago, but we would have looked at all manner of different things. We would have been guided by the report of the inquiry, which did recommend home quarantine, but if we had done that, then that would not be consistent with the National Cabinet decision, and I think we would have had our borders closed to everyone for a very, very long time. Plus, it would have just been inconsistent with the National Cabinet decision. Yes.
Why are they not being taken to another?
I think we've got exactly the person to answer that question just here.
Why are they not being taken to
So we have repurposed the Pullman, and that will now be the Health Hotel. So as I briefed the public on Saturday, we've done the extensive planning to execute this operation, and we'd like to thank our great partners in the Alfred and Victoria Police and our transport for making this happen today. Health Hotel, correct. Yeah. Yeah, so let me make it really clear, and I would ask the media to please be cognizant. We have really nervous residents who don't want their privacy displayed on the news. This is why they're taking those steps. Our PPE requirements for guests leaving is a surgical mask and hand sanitizer, and it is really distressing for them. These are going to be really slow operations. Keep in mind, every time we move one person, terminal cleaning and then another person, so it will take a lot of time, and we would ask for the media, please be respectful of their privacy. No one wants to be scattered on the news tonight, and that's why they're taking these steps.
Is there no other way to shield them that would make them feel they didn't have to break their place?
Yes, so we've tried two options this morning, and one with a shield, and we've actually moved sky buses to block the media to try and take these photos of our community members. Please be mindful of this. That's why they're doing it, and that creates other health issues. These are sick people who need to be transported and need to be transported as quickly as we can.
Can I just add something to that? We've all got jobs to do, but please, everyone in the community needs to know the stuff that these people are wearing, it's not PPE. They've been given PPE, they've got that on. What they're doing, because frankly they don't want to be identified, and nor should they feel compelled to be identified. So we can put up screens, absolutely, and you guys can make decisions. I think we can both play a part in that. It serves no public value at all to be taking photos of people. We wouldn't let you do it in a hospital. They're only wearing this stuff because they've made a judgment that they don't have to wear it. It wasn't issued. It's over and above all the PPE that we give. It's not PPE. It's to protect their personal privacy. It's not about, which they've made that decision, not us. And they're entitled to make that call. And you've all got a job to do, and I'm not being any critical of that, but let's all try and be as respectful as we can be of what they're going through. We'll play our part, and if you guys play yours, then maybe we won't have to deal with those issues. But it was a burst pipe, for heaven's sake. There's not a problem other than there's a burst pipe. And we need to move them somewhere else, and we need to do that in a painstaking way. It takes a long time, because it needs to, because it's got to be done incredibly carefully, and it is.
Just to be clear, Anna, just on that, on moving them, can you just explain, so when you move someone out into a bus, you have to determine to clean up every person?
Correct.
What does that mean? So you clean the entire foyer? Or?
Entire foyer and everywhere where the resident is moved from. That's the standard process for positive and suspected positive cases. So this will take a couple of days.
Is it one person only allowed on each bus and then move? Or
Correct. So one person or in the family group. So if there's a room with 2 or 3 people, they move together. Correct.
And are you confident that the ventilation of the Hilton Hotel will be up to top hotel standards?
Correct, yes. So those assessments have been done. Correct.
At the same ventilation study that was done at the hotel will be done at the hotel.
Correct.
And when people going to be fitted at N95, has that been tested going again?
Yeah, so just to be clear again, so our staff have always worn N95s. So every time there is what we call a bump in, so a new flight arrival, a positive case or a suspected positive case moves, our staff have always been in N95s, and in the transport our staff have always been in N95s. The recommendations from our IPC steering committee about doing all resident-facing operations, should we be in N95s, that's what now we're moving to across both health hotels and quarantine hotels.
Do these guests have their time extended at all?
Sorry?
Do these residents have their time in quarantine extended at all?
Absolutely not.
And just on patient X, is understood to speak to him yesterday, so what's the nature of that conversation?
Yeah, I can confirm I did speak to the family, and we wish them all the very best. And these are private conversations between me and the family. It was a productive conversation, and if there are any actions or uplifts, we'll consider that as part of the incident review, and I can happily share those actions. But again, I'm not going to make any further comments bar what I said on Saturday.
Do you now believe his account that he had told someone he had a nebulizer?
Like I said, I'm happy to. What will happen with the information we've gleaned is we'll include that. Well, it's not as simple as that, and I'm not going to breach their privacy any further. We are. Well, if they want to engage in that discussion with you, that's great. I won't be.
Can I confirm how many people moved from that hotel and how many
Sure. So we've got 13 positive and 18 suspected.
And can you just explain that PPE requirement when they're leaving? Because people might look and think, is a mask and hand sanitizer enough for someone who might have coronavirus? What's the foundation of that?
Yeah, so it's the same reason why we wouldn't just put people in N95s. You actually have to be fit tested and fit checked. And one, it would be a big IPC issue for us to get up close with COVID positive residents and do that work. But two, the advice that we've got from the CHO is that that's not required.
So just on those 13, just on those 13 positive, and sorry, what was the number negative?
13 positive and 18 suspected.
So, yeah, so those other people are in there because they're suspected because they have symptoms.
Correct. They're symptomatic and awaiting either testing or further testing.
We've got 25 active cases in Victoria at the moment, 19 of which are linked to the Holiday Inn. Some of the Holiday Inn people, other than that family of three that we know about, are they in the health hotel as well, or are some of those cases in the health hotel not also?
I might have to come back to you on that. So the positive cases within quarantine or anyone in the community who can't remain in their home safely would come to the health hotel, but that doesn't mean that everyone in the community must do that.
The incident report you talked about when it comes to the nebulizer resident, what does that actually do for the investigation? Does it make recommendations? Does it find who's to blame for something?
Yeah. So there is an incident review going on at the moment, and there is a Safer Care Victoria review, which is a partnership between CQV and Department of Health, which will also do a review on the 3 incidents.
Well, how does that review, do you still remain confident that CQV staff did their job and ascertain whether this person has a nebulizer or not?
We'll await the outcome of the incident review.
And just to clarify, did you...
Will the incident review be made public?
I'm happy to share what we can, of course.
Did you apologise to the man last night when you spoke to him?
I apologised on Saturday for his treatment and the way this has been handled. Absolutely. I did that Saturday and I did it again yesterday.
Can I confirm, will the Holiday Inn remain part of the quarantine program, or is it
The Holiday Inn Flinders Street?
Tullamarine?
Tullamarine. It's currently undergoing a terminal clean and we'll reassess that after the terminal clean.
What about the street one? Like, is it a matter of just repairing the light and cleaning up the light?
We are hoping so, yes. Yeah, we're really hoping so.
On the initial setup of the hotel quarantine program, why was it decided to have these 2 levels of infection control? So the level in the health hotels and then the other one. Why didn't you just put those health hotel controls in every single hotel?
Well, the advice that we had at the time was that you do need to have, and it's consistent with every other state in terms of having a health hotel which has, health providers, access to tertiary and secondary health treatment for that cohort who are genuinely sick. Again, it is a small number of people who come back into Melbourne who are COVID positive, so it wasn't deemed necessary at the time. Again, we're constantly reviewing those procedures and processes, and we'll always seek advice from the CHO and Department of Health to ensure it's as robust as we can make it.
Is it a resources problem? Could you get Alfred Health in every hotel? Why, if we're treating every person who comes back as a suspected case, why aren't we just taking that top level of the
Yeah, I'm happy to get Brett's view of this, but again, if you did that, my worry would be what does that mean for the broader public health system? And if it's not deemed necessary, we wouldn't need to do it. But Brett?
Well, I think it's probably less an issue. There's a dedicated advisory team on infection prevention and control. There is a dedicated Deputy Chief Health Officer for hotel quarantine, so that Brett's dealing with the broader issues, not the specifics of that. Everything that we've done is at the national standard or has informed the national standard changing. But we may have to go further, all of us, not just in Melbourne, but everywhere across the country. We may have to go further. We may have to move, just as we're testing all sorts of different protocols, we may have to move to that kind of N95 mask across the board, everywhere. And in fact, we're making that change. So we've met all the standards. We've played a part in a national program, but it may not be fast enough for a virus that's actually changing. It may not be adequate for a virus that's changing, and that means you've always got to be open to doing more. And we've been pretty clear about the fact that we are open to doing more. But what I won't do, though, is close the Alfred and have all of their staff performing roles that all the experts tell me can be safely performed by others. But it's also very important, Michael, to remember there's no private security working in this. They're either police or they're employees that have been trained that work exclusively for us. There's no second jobs. It is a different model with different groups of people driving it. You don't have to be from the Alfred to necessarily observe a higher standard of mask wearing, a different type of mask, for instance. I think we're kind of in furious agreement. We're moving to that, but it doesn't mean you have to have, one of your biggest hospitals, their entire workforce, not work at the hospital, but instead work at hotels.
It's not necessarily a question of taking all of the Alfred workers to other public hospitals and other health providers. I think the question is,
there's some specifics.
Why wouldn't you go to that absolute treating them all like hotels from the start rather than
what's important to acknowledge when you ask me the question, when you refer to why wouldn't you, so you means not just me and our people, our close team, but a whole series of infection prevention and control experts who provide advice. We asked them to reconfirm that advice in light of what had occurred most recently. I don't think their advice necessarily changed that much, but we've gone beyond it anyway. I need to check that, and it's a daily thing, but we are rolling out those masks, and when we've got more to say about exactly who will be wearing them and when, but we're going well over and above what they had advised us was, the highest standard. Just means these things have to keep on changing. We've got to keep doing more because the virus is not the same as it was. We will make announcements as soon as we can. I think I was asked a question yesterday about, I think it was put to me, surely it must be difficult to get a definitive measure of impact until we know how long this, whether it is in fact 5 days. So we'll have more to say as soon as we can.
So and retrospective after this circuit break is finished, then you can allocate that each business a certain amount of grant.
Yeah, we'll have more to say soon about some additional support, and that'll take different forms. But the focus at the moment is we want to get these rules off as quickly as we can. We are well placed. I'd love to be able to predict what I'll be announcing tomorrow with certainty. That's not the nature of this virus. We've just got to wait these next 24 hours, hopefully see a continuation of the trend that we've seen these last few days, and then we'll have good news for Victoria, and the strategy will have worked. But I do hasten to add that won't mean we go to no rules. We'll still have to get tested if we have symptoms. We'll still have to wear masks in a number of settings. There will still be limits to the number of people that can come to your home. All those things that have served us well. But we're looking to get back to as close to what that kind of resting COVID normal was as we can, but we've got to do that safely.
Speaking of good news, the TGA has literally just approved AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine. Where is this a good sign given we're locally manufacturing?
Yeah, it is. It is a very good sign, and I would say that that's probably the most rigorous testing and approval process anywhere in the world. And I think that should give every Victorian absolute confidence that they should get the jab, they should get vaccinated for them, for their family, and for every family. You know, I'll be getting it, Kath will be getting it, the kids will be getting it, my mum will be getting it. Every single Victorian should get this because it will change the way we live and it will save lives. And you can't get much more important than that. The Brett Curve. You know what I reckon? I reckon we should be giving awards to people who stacked shelves in supermarkets all last year, or nurses, or Skybus drivers, or any of the other heroes out there that have done an amazing job. That is of literally no interest to me. The people of Victoria are my only concern, and getting us past midnight tomorrow night with the best set of rules possible. Sure, on an AstraZeneca.
Terrific news. Who wouldn't be delighted at the prospect of another vaccine, especially one locally manufactured that will deliver millions of doses to Australians. I can't wait to be vaccinated when my time in the queue comes, and looking forward to seeing it roll out across the country. I hope it lifts spirits. You know, the mental health anguish of this pandemic has been extraordinary, but it literally represents the beginning of the end of this pandemic as we roll out a vaccine. So it is incredibly positive to see that development, and to know that Pfizer vaccine will start to roll out in our hotel quarantine system, first ports of entry, our aged care and health sector staff and residents. So fantastic news.
Mental health, we saw lifelines walk over the weekend at hospital emergency departments as well with mental health patients. Do you acknowledge the toll that this lockdown is having on mental health, and how much did you weigh that on making the recommendation?
Yeah, of course. These are terrible decisions to make, knowing what the effect is, and I know that Victorians are particularly sensitised to lockdowns because we went through a terrible second wave. That said, again, the alternative of having to face an outbreak that was out of control would have meant even more trauma for the Victorian people. Whenever we take actions, we are always trying to balance those risks, and you know, I hope Victorians recognise that I've always got their health and wellbeing in mind.
I'm not sure if you answered this before, but why is regional construction included in this lockdown? It's the first time we've ever had to shut down before.
Look, it's really that across-the-board set of legal directions to ensure that we've got a single set of directions across the state.
Can I just get updates on a couple of things, please, Brett? First, 19 local cases now. Have you got the genomic results for how many of those?
The great majority, actually. I mean, those in the last couple of days, not. But before that, all of the B117 variant, and I've got every expectation these will be the same. They're epidemiologically linked to our known cases.
And any going in deeper to identify which individual may have infected another, or does that not particularly matter?
It doesn't particularly matter. We know that it came out of quarantine.
And also, the nebuliser issue, when it first came up, you've been talking about that as a working theory. Have you settled that?
Look, I think these things in the world of epidemiology always remain working hypotheses. It's not to say that coronavirus isn't incredibly contagious under normal circumstances. With a variant of concern, even more so. There is no denialism about airborne transmission from my point of view. This virus can transmit to others very easily, and when, I've said before, when you address the risk of close proximity transmission or droplet transmission, the transmission that you see is often airborne transmission. I know that nebulizers can increase that risk, and the epidemiological links are that those who are on that floor of the quarantine hotel when the nebuliser was in use, or on the days that was in use, that's the linkage, and that's why it supports that theory as opposed to other days when it wasn't in use.
And just the last one, updates, Emma.
Alex.
On the lockdown, we have seen in the previous lockdowns and especially on the towers that there was a health advice that was provided that when it went to cabinet, the decision slightly deviated. For example, the timeline of when the towers should be locked down and one of the So, in terms of your health advice for this lockdown, what we've ended up with, what are the decisions that were made at Cabinet that weren't exactly your health advice?
With respect to this lockdown? No, we come to an agreement whenever you sign directions, and I'm signing them at the moment, although there are delegated individuals who can do the same. I have to be entirely comfortable with signing them. So I take legal and moral responsibility for doing that. So whatever directions get laid down with my signature on them have my full support and agreement.
Given that those directions have gone to Cabinet and can't be released through normal FOI processes, would you be happy to release those to the general public and see the public?
Oh, so they're not questions for me. The department has FOI processes. I'm not involved in the decisions about refusing release or otherwise.
Well, if you're talking about directions, Alex, the directions are publicly available.
The specific advice that was provided by the health department that
Oh, look, I'd need to.
That's what we know is privacy. You might argue hearing it, but don't.
Well, I'm.
Have the right to see the advice.
Yeah, but you've just Well, I'm happy to have a look at that for you. But you've just had the Chief Health Officer confirm for you that his advice is completely faithfully depicted and represented in the orders that he signed, which are public. And there's no. Well, as I said, I'll have a look at it for you. That's it. The Chief Health Officer's signature's on it. He's standing behind it. There's no variation. This is what we needed to do. It's working, and I would need to get some advice about the legal status of those matters. But again, we should just be very clear. I don't know how many times now, but the Chief Health Officer and I have stood up and talked to you guys many, many times, and he signs these orders, and they are consistent with what he believes is appropriate, as he's just said. And we follow the advice of the Chief Health Officer, and some people criticise us for that, as is their right, but we've been very clear that we follow advice.
Well, on that point, because the curfew wasn't on his advice, so in terms of the...
No, that's not what was found at all, actually. There's a couple of court cases that I think probably found differently. That was absolutely appropriately handled, and that's not my judgment. The curfew was a matter that was tested at law, and I would refer you to the... But you just mentioned the curfew, not me.
It wasn't on the recommendation of the public health official.
Yeah, but, well, actually, no.
It was just not moved, no one's arguing with.
No, but I think you'll find, without going back over the debate about movement equals virus transmission and all of that, the actions of public health officials were not just because I reckon it, but because a judge said so, were appropriate and completely in the spirit, intent, and completely compliant with the law. That's a matter of that's gone to court. Alex, seriously, I'm happy to go back over it, mate. But look, there is a judgment. The judge ordered. The people who put forward a different view lost. The matter was dealt with.
Moving on.
Yeah, happy to. Yes.
Was that based on police advice that they didn't think that they were capable of setting that up over any period of time, not just the 5 hours before lockdown?
No, it's just common sense, and the police minister who's in constant contact with Victoria Police, and some things that we know what police's views are. They've made them very clear to us about the logistical challenges involved in setting up a ring of steel. We absolutely know that. They've been very clear with us, and just the passage of time and the fact that we ran one for so long, I think it's fair to say we can provide expert advice on those matters, and we know exactly where they sit on this. And look, just back to the issues about ring of steel, differential rules in different parts of the state, all those sorts of issues, right? If it was a longer lockdown, then the decision would have been different, because it would have needed to be. It wouldn't have been proportionate. It wouldn't have been the right thing to do. This, however, as a short, sharp circuit breaker, is by its very nature different, and that's why the decisions look different, and that's why hopefully tomorrow night we can make announcements that it comes off.
As long as it's legally okay, will you commit to
I've answered your question. I'm not making commitments that I need advice on before I get that advice. I've answered that question, I think, a number of times. I don't hand out cabinet documents and things without getting advice, and I don't think you want a Premier to do that. Not now, not ever.
Compliance
I can, yeah, so I was going to interject before and say on I think James Campbell asked a question about compliance. We can get you the latest Victoria Police data, and that may tell you, may tell us something or it may not. I'm more than happy to chase that up for you. My sense of it, Michael, none of us are touring around much, but getting from the middle southeastern suburbs into the city most days, talk to you or do other things. A lot of people wearing their masks, a lot of people doing the right thing, traffic is down, all those metrics are as we would expect them to be, so that when we get a case, they've only got 3 close contacts, not 100. That's what we're after, and that's why movement has to be limited, as painful and difficult as that is. So my sense of it is that people, the vast majority of Victorians are doing the right thing. I'm eternally grateful, deeply grateful to them for that. And if I can give a shout out, I don't think anyone will mind me giving a shout out to particularly those people who, because they've come in contact or they've been at a location where somebody who had the virus was, they're locked down for 14 days. Let's spare a thought for them, and let's all of us as Victorians thank them for the sacrifice they're making on behalf of all of us. But if there's any data that speaks to this issue about whether it's at the same level or less or more, I'm more than happy to chase that up for you. Well, no, it's very important. No. I don't tell police how much discretion to use. They are empowered at law to exercise discretion. They have training, they have processes. That's entirely a matter for the Chief Commissioner, and any variation in the discretion that's issued, you'd need to speak to him about that, but he doesn't get instructions from me. The law prevents that. The operational independence of Victoria Police is very important. Also acknowledging that there is absolutely discretion used, that's an important point and sort of got lost a bit last year. There were many more warnings issued than there were fines issued. So Victorians do get the benefit of a police force that are focused on the task, but are fair. That's my view.
I think the most recent update we've had from police, fewer than 3,000 people, or I think it was roughly 40,000 fines issued had actually paid that fine. And a lot of fines were taken back. Do you see that as having any impact on?
I don't know that a lot were taken back. I wouldn't necessarily use that term. I think the answer to the question is in the very first part of it, the latest update from police. So I think it's them you probably have to speak to, Rachel, about that. I don't have that data. They will, and they'll have a sense of it, and any trends, any patterns, and they'd be the people to speak to.
Would you expect that 6 months after the lockdown, a whole lot more than those other 3,000 people have paid their fines?
I think it's very difficult to know what to expect. It was a year like no other, and the Chief Commissioner's made it very clear, fines must be paid except in extraordinary circumstances, acknowledging that discretion is already used in relation to the issuance of that fine. It's not an automatic thing. It's not like going through a gantry on a tollway without enough money in your account. It's not automatic. The fines are issued and there is discretion exercised. That's the first check and balance, and beyond that there are some review procedures, but I think Shane Patton was very clear late last year, I think, about these matters, and if he wants to update you, he can.
Emma, what progress have you made on getting your workforce for day on testing?
Yep, so the daily testing, voluntary testing started last week and has commenced. And those discussions, I think we're close to finalising the consultation program with our staff and with the unions, hopefully today, tomorrow.
So that will, because I think what the President was talking about last week was that you expect those people would be willing to get tested voluntarily every day, but a deal need to be done to settle what they would be paid.
Correct. Correct. So the point of compensation will be resolved today or tomorrow, and then we will look at the longer term program about if this was mandatory, what would that look like, what would the compensation be, and can we leverage and take advantage of some of the newer self-testing kits that can be done at home. These are all things that we're considering.
So when you expect mandatory testing to actually be enforced?
Sorry, can you ask?
When you expect the mandatory
We will definitely need some time. I'm not sure how long. We'll get that done as soon as possible, but that is a significant consultation piece across a range of staffing groups and unions, and we need to take the time to make sure that's done properly. Too early to tell, so it's linked to the fortnightly pay run. So I can tell you in a fortnight's time. Certainly in talking to staff, staff aren't opposing this. Again, the one thing that our staff have always done really well, and I thank them for that, is the daily testing. And most of the conversations I've had is whatever they need to do to ensure the program and the community is safe.
And just back on patient quickly, what prompted you to call him yesterday afternoon?
What prompted? Well, of course we were always going to do that. I'm just not going to call someone whilst they're in ICU. That would not be a good practice, and especially with the nature of our conversation. So the IPC is across the Alfred, who will look after the resident moves, and Skybus do have their own spotters there. I'm happy to follow up with you after, and we'll take that matter further.
And just on the sprinkler, was it a sprinkler or a reverse pipe, and did it happen in a room where someone was present?
Yeah, so it was the advice that I've got is it was a sprinkler. It was not during cleaning. Now, whether that resulted in a pipe bursting or a pipe leaking, the one challenge that we've had is it's really difficult to do any rectification works in a health hotel, and we wouldn't take those risks for any member of the community. That's why we're evacuating.
So did it happen in proximity to anyone who was quarantined?
No.
With this 5-day lockdown, what are you still most concerned about? What would it be, if anything, that restricts us from lifting it tomorrow?
I'm most concerned about the thing that comes completely out of left field, that we suddenly see a community case without links to our known cases. That can still happen. There are thousands of people who've been to exposure sites. Many of those have been tested. The great majority of those have been tested. That's really encouraging. But there might be someone who wasn't aware that that's been flagged as an exposure site, who nonetheless develops symptoms, gets tested and suddenly comes to our attention. If we can link it back, great. But if they've been in the community, had a number of contacts, that's a concern. I don't expect that to happen, but that's something I wouldn't like to see today. No, I don't think so. We have chased this down so rapidly. Whenever we have identified a new notification, so those close contacts, secondary close contacts, we've chased them down so quickly. So the fact that we're seeing cases emerge in those we've already identified is simply because of that. That's a terrific indictment of the enormously hard work the team's done. They have worked, I know because I get the emails, until the wee hours of the morning, and they've been absolutely tireless.
We know that we're getting roughly 11,000 Pfizer vaccines per week, 170,000 roughly frontline workers in Victoria. That's months to get them immunised, I suppose. Are you at all hopeful that the AstraZeneca can speed that up, or how long do you think that process is going to take?
Yeah, look, it's really for the Commonwealth to speak to in terms of what the production capacity will be for the AstraZeneca vaccine, but the fact that it's been approved is obviously one of those critical steps. Manufacturing has been readied over recent months, and it would be great to see the production ramp up to a point where we can really start rolling out to those most at risk and those most at risk of severe illness. I don't know. I think they're as keen as anyone to receive it. Obviously, they bore the brunt of the risk through this whole pandemic, so they're really keen to see it roll out as soon as possible. We'd all love to see that.
Just starting with that, am I correct in saying that people who have been vaccinated, we have very good data that virtually no one is dying who's been vaccinated? Indeed, we have very good data that people who have been vaccinated are not getting seriously ill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So they're not contracting the long COVID that we're concerned about in addition to the design.
That's right.
Given that, once we reach a certain point of immunisation, I'd like you to think about what number that should be. Why would we worry about transmission if it's just causing people to become mildly ill? So
it certainly relates to the 5% of people who won't be protected even with a really good vaccine like the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines. If those 5% are in aged care settings, are in other settings where transmission risk is really substantial, going from one person to another, then we should be concerned about that insufficient protection. That said, who wouldn't want the vast majority of the population vaccinated in order to protect against that risk? But it does mean, 1 in 3 people in aged care died when they got infected with COVID. And so you want a vaccine that provides 100% protection ideally. So even at 95%, there's a risk to people who remain vulnerable.
So even at 95%, what I guess I'm trying to clear up for people is that even once we've been vaccinated, because of that 5%, we could conceivably be seeing scenarios like this unfold.
Look,
what we're living through
No,
now.
I'm not sure that's the case, because we would have the great majority of people most at risk of severe illness, most at risk of dying, protected by that vaccine. At the moment, we wouldn't want to be in a situation where all of those people could be potentially exposed.
Just let me understand. No one's vaccinated here now. We're not talking about now. What I'm talking about is in 8 months, 9 months, 11 months, when the vast majority of people have been vaccinated, at what point can we say you're not going to lock us down again because of the 5% that you say this vaccine's never going to work for?
Well, those very questions